The match struck at 2:17 a.m. on May 25, 1987. Marcus Lewis held it steady, watching the flame dance in the darkness of a Detroit alley. 5 gallons of gasoline already pooled around 3 exit doors of an abandoned building on Junction Street. Inside, 12 people slept, worked, or got high, completely unaware they had less than 3 minutes before their world became an inferno. Marcus didn't hesitate. He touched the flame to the gasoline and stepped back as fire exploded across the building's perimeter, sealing every exit in walls of heat and smoke. This wasn't a drug deal gone wrong. This wasn't a robbery or a turf war shootout. This was calculated execution by fire, all because 7 days earlier, a rival dealer named Tyrone T-Bone Harris had looked at Marcus the wrong way on a street corner and refused to nod back. In the currency of Detroit's 1987 crack trade, that disrespect was a death sentence. By 2:30 a.m., 5 people were dying. By dawn, Marcus Lewis had become a mass murderer. This is the story of how 3 seconds of eye contact cost 10 lives and destroyed 2 families forever. Detroit in 1987 was a graveyard of American dreams. The auto factories that once made Motor City the richest metro area in America had closed or moved overseas, taking 500,000 jobs with them. By the mid-1980s, 50% of black men in Detroit were unemployed. The city offered 2 options: welfare checks that couldn't cover rent, or the streets. The streets won. Crack cocaine had flooded Detroit in 1984, and by 1987 it was the only economy left standing in neighborhoods where legitimate work had vanished completely. Marcus Lewis wasn't born a killer. He was born into a system designed to fail him, and when that system gave him only one path to survival, he took it. Then he made choices within that world that turned him into something monstrous. The question isn't whether Marcus Lewis deserved his life sentence. He did. The question is, how many more Marcus Lewises are being created right now, in cities across America, where poverty and pride and the need to survive create perfect storms of violence. What you're about to hear is extreme. It involves mass murder by fire, the crack epidemic's darkest chapter, and the thin line between defending your reputation and burning people alive. But it's a story that needs to be told, because the systems that created Marcus Lewis in 1987 are still operating today. Marcus Anthony Lewis was 26 years old in the spring of 1987, pulling in $8,000 a week running 3 crack houses on Detroit's west side. He wasn't flashy like the Chambers brothers, the 4 siblings from Arkansas, who'd built a crack empire employing hundreds and running their operation like a Fortune 500 company with employee ID cards and sales quotas. Marcus was mid-level, professional, careful. He drove a midnight blue 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass Supreme, wore simple clothes, and made pancakes every Sunday morning for his girlfriend's 6-year-old daughter while playing his dead mother's Temptations records. The little girl called him Uncle Cash and drew him pictures of families holding hands under smiling suns that Marcus kept folded in his wallet. To her, he was safety and stability. To his younger brother Jerome, he was the man who'd kept their family afloat after their father dropped dead of a heart attack on a Ford assembly line at age 42. And their diabetic mother couldn't afford the insulin that might have saved her life. Marcus had dropped out of Redford High School 3 weeks after his father's funeral in 1977, taking whatever work he could find at $4.25 an hour when hours were available, which they rarely were. It wasn't enough to keep the lights on and his mother's prescriptions filled. By 1979, he was running marijuana packages for local dealers. By 1983, when crack arrived and transformed the economics of drug dealing overnight, Marcus saw an opportunity and took it with both hands. He never used his own product, never shorted his suppliers, never tolerated violence unless business absolutely demanded it. He'd beaten a runner unconscious in 1985 for skimming $50, held a loaded gun to a rival dealer's head in 1986, and pulled the trigger on an empty chamber as psychological warfare. But these were calculated moves in an industry where showing weakness once meant spending the rest of your short life fighting to get respect back. Jerome Lewis, 23 years old, had joined his brother's operation reluctantly in 1986, pulled in by loyalty and the mathematical reality that working at Burger King for minimum wage couldn't compete with $500 a week managing logistics and counting money. The brothers worked well together. Marcus handled strategy and enforcement, Jerome managed supply chains and finances, and together they built something reliable in a business where most operators were dead or in prison within 2 years. They weren't the biggest crew on the West Side, but they were known as professionals who paid on time, didn't cheat, and kept their word. Jerome's girlfriend LaShonda was 6 months pregnant in May 1987, carrying their first child, a son they planned to name Marcus Jr. She begged Jerome to get out, to take whatever money they'd saved and leave Detroit, start over somewhere the past couldn't follow. Jerome promised her he would, after one more year, after they'd stacked enough cash to disappear completely. That promise died on May 17, 1987, at 2:35 in the afternoon, on the corner of Fenkel and Schoolcraft. Marcus had driven there in his Cutlass to meet a supplier. Tyrone T-Bone Harris was there meeting one of his lieutenants. T-Bone was 29, originally from Detroit's East Side, tall with a gold tooth and a limp from a bullet that had grazed his hip in 1984. He was expanding his operation westward as competition intensified across the city, setting up crack houses. 2 blocks from Marcus's territory. Territory was fluid in Detroit's crack trade. Crews expanded and contracted, negotiated, and occasionally went to war, but most disputes got settled with conversations or negotiated boundaries. Nobody wanted bodies if bodies could be avoided, because bodies meant police attention, and police attention was bad for everyone's profit margins. But respect was different. Respect was the foundation everything else was built on. When Marcus nodded at T-Bone, professional courtesy between operators, T-Bone looked at him for 3, maybe 4 seconds, didn't nod back, didn't acknowledge him, just stared with level eyes, and then turned away and continued his conversation as if Marcus Lewis didn't exist. It was a small thing, objectively meaningless, a look that in any other context would be forgotten within minutes. But context is everything. In the economics of respect that governed Detroit's crack trade in 1987, that look was a public declaration: I don't recognize your authority, I don't fear you, you are beneath my acknowledgement. Marcus's suppliers saw it, Marcus's driver saw it, 2 of T-Bone's runners saw it and exchanged knowing glances. By nightfall, everyone on the West Side would know that T-Bone had disrespected Marcus Lewis to his face in front of witnesses, and Marcus had done nothing. Marcus got in his car and drove straight to Jerome's apartment with his hands shaking, not from fear but from rage so complete it threatened to overwhelm rational thought. "We got a problem," Marcus said when Jerome opened the door, and Jerome saw his brother's face and knew immediately someone was about to die. Marcus explained the look, the disrespect, the witnesses. Jerome listened carefully, hoping his brother would calm down, hoping there was a way to de-escalate, but he knew Marcus, and he knew the streets. Some slights could be ignored, others demanded response. "What you want to do?" Jerome asked, though he already knew the answer. "Send a message," Marcus said, "something everyone will remember." Over the next 6 days, that message took shape. They would burn T-Bone's main operation to the ground with everyone inside. The disrespect started costing Marcus immediately. 2 days after the look, 3 of his best runners approached him at a gas station and quit. The oldest, 21-year-old Dwayne, did the talking while the other 2 stood behind him with their eyes down. "We appreciate everything, Cash," Dwayne said, using Marcus's street name, "but we heard what happened with T-Bone. We heard you ain't done nothing yet. And if you ain't going to do nothing, we can't work for someone who—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. Someone who lets himself get played. Someone who shows weakness. Someone who isn't willing to defend his reputation with violence. Marcus noticed one of them had started carrying a beeper, the kind T-Bone's crew used. They'd already switched sides. This conversation was just professional courtesy before they took his customers, his corners, and his business. Marcus let them walk away without threatening them, which was itself a sign of how badly his position had deteriorated. 3 runners leaving was survivable. 3 runners leaving and telling everyone why they left was catastrophic. Word spread through the West Side like wildfire. Marcus Lewis got disrespected and did nothing. Marcus Lewis is weak. Marcus Lewis is finished. His weekly income dropped from $8,000 to maybe $5,000 as one of his 3 crack houses effectively shut down from lack of workers willing to operate there. Customers started going to T-Bone instead because in the crack trade you bought from whoever had product and looked strong enough to stay in business. Weakness was contagious and fatal. On May 21st, 4 days after the look, Jerome's girlfriend LaShonda cornered Marcus outside Jerome's apartment. "You need to let this go," she said with no preamble, standing in the parking lot with her arms crossed over her 6 months pregnant belly. "Whatever you're planning, I know you. I know how you get when someone disrespects you. And I'm telling you right now, My baby's father isn't dying over some stupid beef between you and T-Bone Harris." Marcus looked at her and saw real fear, not for herself but for Jerome, for the life growing inside her, for the future she was trying to build despite living in a city that offered her almost nothing. "Jerome's fine," Marcus said. "Nothing's going to happen to Jerome." LaShonda stepped aside, shaking her head. "You ain't listening. But when Jerome ends up dead or in prison, don't act surprised." Her words stayed with Marcus, but he pushed them away. His brother had everything to lose: a girlfriend, a baby coming, a potential path out. But Marcus was about to risk all of it over a look, because some things mattered more than safety. Respect was one of them. Marcus and Jerome purchased 5 gallons of gasoline from 3 different gas stations over 2 days. 2 gallons from a Sunoco on Grand River Avenue, 2 gallons from a Marathon on Livernois, 1 gallon from a BP station near the Detroit River. They split the purchases to avoid suspicion, paying cash, saying nothing about what the gas was for. The attendants didn't ask questions. Gas station workers in Detroit in 1987 had learned that asking questions got you killed. They pumped gas, took money, and went back to their newspapers and portable TVs behind bulletproof glass. Jerome stored the gasoline in his trunk in red plastic containers. The smell permeated his 1983 Buick Regal. Every time he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw those containers, his stomach tightened. This was real. This was happening. On May 23rd, Marcus conducted reconnaissance on the Junction Street building, driving past 3 times between 9 p.m. and midnight, noting patterns. The 3-story abandoned apartment building had been T-Bone's primary West Side base for 3 weeks. 10 to 15 people inside at any given time: dealers, runners, lookouts, and users. Marcus noted the entrances: front door, back door, fire escape on the east side. He noted the windows: first floor mostly boarded up, second and third floor still with glass. He wrote everything in a small spiral notebook, drawing a crude map and marking exit points. That notebook would later become Exhibit 14 Billions at his trial: handwritten plans for mass murder in ballpoint pen on lined paper. May 24, 1987 was a Sunday. Marcus made pancakes for his girlfriend's daughter Kesha that morning, same as always. Temptations on the record player. The ritual unchanged despite what Marcus was planning for that night, or maybe because of it. Maybe this was his way of proving to himself he was still human. Kesha helped pour batter, talking about school and friends and her birthday party in 3 weeks. She'd never get that party. At 8:30 p.m., Marcus and Jerome met with 3 members of their crew: Lamar Jones, Darnell Wilson, and Kevin Brown. They met in the parking lot of an abandoned Chrysler parts supplier. Marcus explained the mission without mentioning fire. "We're sending a message to T-Bone's operation tonight. Hit his main house. Make it clear what happens when you disrespect us." The 3 men nodded. This sounded like normal business, maybe a shooting, maybe vandalism, scare tactics. None suspected what Marcus actually planned. At 1:53 a.m. on Monday, May 25th, the 5 men stood in the alley behind the Junction Street building. The street was empty, just the low hum of distant traffic and the occasional bark of a dog. The temperature had dropped into the mid-50s. Marcus opened Jerome's trunk and revealed the 5 gallons of gasoline. "The fuck?" Lamar said. "We're burning it," Marcus said simply. "The whole building, everyone inside." Silence. The 3 crew members looked at each other, then at Marcus, then at the gasoline. "How many people in there?" Darnell asked. "Don't know," Marcus said. "Don't care. T-Bone disrespected us." This is the response. Kevin took a step back. "Man, I signed up for a hit, not a massacre. You talking about burning people alive? I'm talking about sending a message," Marcus said. "You in or out?" Kevin looked at the building, at the gasoline, at Marcus's face, and saw something there that told this was happening with or without him. "I'm out," Kevin said. "I ain't doing this." He walked away, disappearing into the darkness. Marcus watched him go without expression. Anyone else? Lamar and Darnell stayed, not because they agreed, not because they thought it was right, but because loyalty in the crack trade was currency, and betraying your crew leader often meant death. "Let's do it quick," Lamar said quietly. Marcus picked up 2 containers. Jerome took 2. Lamar took 1 at 2:07 a.m. 3 men approached a 3-story building carrying enough gasoline to turn it into an inferno. Inside the building, approximately 12 people were present. On the second floor, 19-year-old Kesha Johnson sat on a torn couch counting money. managing the night shift rotation. Her 8-month-old son, Darnell, was with her mother across town. Kesha planned to finish her shift at 6 a.m., go home, sleep a few hours, then take Darnell to the park. She hummed quietly while counting, a gospel song her grandmother used to sing. The photograph of Darnell in her jacket pocket was worn soft from handling, creased and recreased so many times the paper was tissue thin. In less than 10 minutes, that photograph would be one of the few ways to identify her body. 23-year-old Marcus Slim Patterson smoked a cigarette by the window. He was saving money to buy his girlfriend an engagement ring, had found one at a pawn shop for $200, had 75% saved. 3 more weeks, he told himself. 20-year-old Jamal Williams slept on a mattress in the corner, exhausted from a double shift. He paid for his sick mother's lupus medications. Without this job, she'd have nothing. In the back room, 3 users nodded off after purchasing product. Their names were never determined. No one reported them missing. Marcus poured gasoline around the back door of the building, soaking the wooden frame and threshold. The liquid spread across concrete, creating a dark pool. Jerome handled the front entrance, pouring 2 gallons across the steps and around the doorframe. Inside, Kesha stretched and checked the wind-up alarm clock on the table, 2:15 a.m. Still hours to go. She stood and walked to the window, looking out through the boarded slats at the empty street. She didn't see the 3 men in the alley. She didn't smell the gasoline. She had no idea she had less than 5 minutes to live. Marcus pulled out a book of matches. His hands were steady. He felt nothing. No fear, no excitement, no hesitation, just cold determination. This was a business decision. T-Bone had disrespected him. The only language people understood in the crack trade was violence. He struck the match at 2:17 a.m. The fire started instantly. Gasoline ignites at its flash point faster than most people realize. The match touched the liquid and flame erupted, a whoosh of heat and light that traveled along the trail of accelerant in seconds. The back door was engulfed first, then the side entrance. Jerome lit the front, and suddenly the building's ground floor exits were walls of fire. Kesha smelled smoke before she saw flames, stood confused for maybe 3 seconds, then saw orange glow from below and understood. "Fire!" she screamed. "There's a fire!" Everyone on the second floor snapped alert. The building was old, dry, structurally compromised from years of abandonment. The fire found fuel everywhere: old wood, cardboard boxes, trash, chemical residue. It spread faster than anyone inside could comprehend. The first floor was fully engulfed within 90 seconds. Slim reached the top of the stairs and recoiled from heat. Flames blocked the entire descent. Smoke poured upward, thick and black. Kesha ran to a boarded window, grabbed a metal pipe from a broken bed frame, and started smashing at the boards. Others joined her. Some boards gave way, others held firm. Jamal got one window partially open and looked down. Second floor, maybe 15 feet to the ground. Survivable if you landed right, fatal if you didn't. "We got to jump," he yelled. But smoke was spreading faster than the fire itself. The second floor filled with smoke within 3 minutes. Visibility dropped to nothing. People coughed, choked, called out for each other in darkness. Some went toward what they thought were exits and found only walls. Marcus stood in the alley watching the fire grow. He'd expected flames. He hadn't expected this. The building was an inferno. Smoke poured from every opening. He could hear screaming from inside, high-pitched, desperate, terrified. "Jesus Christ," Lamar whispered behind him. Jerome stared at the building, his face illuminated by firelight. "Marcus, people are still in there." "I know," Marcus said. "We got to—" Jerome started. "We got to leave," Marcus interrupted. Now, 4 minutes since the first match, 10 people trapped inside. 5 would break through windows or find exits not yet fully engulfed. 5 would not. This was the moment of choice. Marcus could have called for help, could have tried to break more windows, could have pulled people out before the fire spread further. But calling for help meant admitting he was there, meant explaining why, meant prison. Marcus turned and walked away from the burning building. Jerome hesitated for 5 seconds, 5 seconds that felt eternal, then followed his brother. There was no coming back from this choice. Kesha Johnson never made it out. She'd broken through one window board and was trying to climb through when smoke overcame her. She lost consciousness with one leg out. The window, her body caught between escape and death. Fire department investigators found her there 6 hours later. The photograph of her son was still in her jacket pocket, though the paper had burned to ash. They identified her by her high school ring. Marcus "Slim" Patterson jumped from a second-floor window and broke both legs on impact. He tried to crawl away, but smoke inhalation had damaged his lungs. He made it maybe 30 feet before collapsing. They found him face down in the alley, still clutching the $200 he'd been saving for the engagement ring. Jamal Williams tried to help others escape before saving himself. Witnesses saw him breaking boards off windows, pushing people through, going back inside when he could have run. He succumbed to smoke on the third trip back. They found his body near 3 unconscious users he'd been trying to drag toward a window. His mother's lupus medication was in his jacket pocket. Of the 12 people in the building, 7 survived, 5 died. All 5 victims died from smoke inhalation or carbon monoxide poisoning before fire physically reached them. The 3 users in the back room never woke up. They'd been too high to respond to the screaming and chaos. They died in their sleep. 2 other victims were crew members whose names were never fully established. One was identified only as Ray, approximate age 25. The other was never identified at all. The fire department received the first call at 2:34 a.m., 17 minutes after Marcus lit the match. By the time the first engine arrived, the building was fully involved. Firefighters rescued 2 people from windows. 3 others had escaped on their own, but 5 were already dead. The fire burned for 2 hours before it was fully extinguished, leaving a collapsed smoking shell. Marcus Lewis drove through silent streets with his hands shaking. He'd expected a fire, expected damage, expected T-Bone to get the message. He hadn't expected the screaming. Hadn't expected to hear people dying while he stood in an alley and consciously chose to walk away. Jerome sat silent in the passenger seat, his face gray, replaying those 5 seconds of hesitation when he could have called for help. Lamar sat in the back with his head in his hands, hearing screams he'd hear for the rest of his life. They drove to an empty parking lot near the Detroit River and sat in silence for 20 minutes. Finally, Marcus spoke. "Nobody says anything. Nobody knows we were there. We were at my apartment all night, asleep. We don't know anything about any fire." Jerome and Lamar nodded, but Marcus knew it wouldn't hold. Someone always saw something, and even if they hadn't, the guilt would eat them alive. Detective Raymond Washington of the Detroit Police Department Homicide Division received the case at 9 a.m. Within 72 hours, he had a theory. Within 3 weeks, he had arrests. Street sources confirmed the tension between Marcus Lewis and T-Bone Harris. A survivor named Raymond Ray Mitchell had seen 3 men in the alley with gasoline containers right before the flames started. 5 empty red plastic containers were found behind the building. Footprints in the ash matched at least 3 different shoe sizes, and Marcus's spiral notebook was found near where the lookouts usually stood, containing a crude map of the building and notes about entry points. The notebook was in Marcus's handwriting, confirmed by comparing it to a traffic citation he'd signed 3 months earlier. On June 15, 1987, 21 days after the fire, Detective Washington led 8 officers to Marcus Lewis's apartment at 6 a.m. They expected resistance. Marcus had a reputation for violence and always carried weapons. The tactical team wore vests and carried AR-15 seconds. They had a battering ram ready. They didn't need it. Marcus answered the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt. No weapon, no attempt to run. He looked at Washington and the 8 officers and simply nodded. "I know why you're here," Marcus said quietly. Inside the apartment, his girlfriend Shanice held her 6-year-old daughter while the child cried. Shanice's face was swollen from crying. She'd known this day was coming. "Take care of her," Marcus said, looking at the little girl. "Promise me." Officers found Jerome 15 minutes later. Same situation, no resistance. They arrested Lamar Jones the same morning. He broke immediately, confessed everything, turned state's witness. The trial began September 14, 1987 in Oakland County Circuit Court, moved from Wayne County because media coverage had saturated Detroit. The prosecution's case was straightforward. Marcus Lewis had been publicly disrespected on May 17. His reputation and business suffered. Rather than resolve the conflict through negotiation or walking away, Lewis planned and executed an arson attack designed to kill everyone inside a building. 5 people died. 7 survived only by luck. This was premeditated murder, 5 counts, each carrying mandatory life without parole. The defense argued Marcus had acted without full understanding of consequences, that he'd intended to destroy property, not lives, that the fire spread faster than any reasonable person could have anticipated, that Marcus Lewis was a product of a broken system. Father dead at 42, mother dead from treatable illness, funneled into illegal economy by necessity, operating under street codes that demanded violent response to disrespect. The jury deliberated 6 hours, guilty on all counts. Judge Margaret Sullivan sentenced Marcus Anthony Lewis on October 8, 1987 to life in prison without possibility of parole. Jerome Lewis received the same. Lamar Jones, who'd cooperated, received 25 years. Judge Sullivan looked at Marcus before pronouncing sentence, "Mr. Lewis, 5 young people are dead because you valued your reputation more than human life." Kesha Johnson was 19 years old with an 8-month-old son. Marcus Patterson was 23, saving for an engagement ring. Jamal Williams was 20, supporting his sick mother. You took that from them over a look that lasted 3 seconds. Marcus stood silent. Later he'd tell his cellmate that in that moment he felt nothing, just emptiness where his life used to be. Marcus Anthony Lewis died on April 3, 2003 at age 42 in Michigan State Prison. Massive heart attack at 2:17 a.m., the exact time he'd lit the match 16 years earlier. He'd been a model prisoner but was haunted. Woke screaming, said he heard voices listing the names, Kesha, Slim, Jamal, the ones whose names were never recorded. Jerome Lewis was released in 2027 after 40 years, died 6 months later from a stroke, alone. Lamar Jones lives in Phoenix under a fake name, working minimum wage, carrying guilt that never diminishes. The Junction Street building was demolished in 1988. In 2003, a developer built low-income apartments on the lot. Families live there now. Kids play where 5 people burned to death. There's no memorial, no plaque, just silence covering tragedy. 38 years have passed since May 25, 1987. Was Marcus Lewis a monster? Yes. Was he also a desperate man operating in an economy that offered no alternatives, following street codes that demanded violent response to disrespect? Also yes. Both can be true simultaneously. That's the most disturbing part. Marcus Lewis didn't wake up one morning and decide to become a mass murderer. He was created one closed factory at a time, one denied job at a time, one desperate choice at a time, one disrespect at a time. Monsters aren't born. They're made. And the system that made Marcus Lewis is still operating, still closing factories, still denying alternatives, still funneling young men into illegal economies, still creating situations where respect becomes currency and violence becomes logic. 5 people are dead because of choices Marcus Lewis made. He deserved his life sentence. But how many more Marcus Lewises are being created right now? How many young men are being pushed toward that line between survival and atrocity? If this story made you question justice, desperation, or how far you'd go to protect your family, leave a comment. What would you have done in Marcus Lewis's place? Subscribe, because these stories deserve to be remembered. History we don't remember, we repeat. Remember their names: Kesha Johnson, Marcus Patterson, Jamal Williams, and 2 others whose names were lost, but whose deaths matter just as much. Remember Marcus Lewis, not to forgive him, but to understand how a human being becomes capable of such horror. Because understanding is the only path to prevention, and prevention is the only justice that actually matters.